Long by now, it is incredibly likely that you have already seen, or at the very least heard about in some capacity, the speech made by Emma Gonzalez at the March for Our Lives protest event that was held in Washington, D.C. on Saturday, March 24th, 2018. Every speech given that day was vital, impassioned, all deeply poignant, and everybody who stood up on that stage to speak was monumentally brave and worthy of the highest praise.
I just threw up on international television, and it feels great!
And in Gonzalez's case, it is a massive understatement to say that it was a speech which was much more noteworthy and memorable than it already would have been had it been delivered in the manner of any other passionate rallying cry for seismic cultural change, such as Gonzalez's We Call BS address from several weeks before. But Gonzalez's bravery extended beyond the courage already needed to get up on stage and face the eyes of the crowd she could see before her, and the even larger audience watching from behind the eyes of the cameras, broadcasting every moment live to the world. Because for a staggering 4 minutes and 23 seconds, Gonzalez chose not to say anything at all. In its uncut form, without me so rudely talking over the protracted pregnant pause that was the entire point of the speech, you could likely comprehend for yourself everything Gonzalez was intending you to understand with her act of wordlessness, before she then concludes by plainly stating the reason.
Since the time that I came out here, it has been 6 minutes and 20 seconds. The shooter has ceased shooting and will soon abandon his rifle, blend in with the students as they escape, and walk free for an hour before arrest. Fight for your lives before it's someone else's job.
But as I watched this moment unfold, that empty space in her speech allowed my mind to fill the silence with these thoughts. Up until the horrific event that has come to make their names and their cause synonymous with the perpetually controversial subject of America's relationship with guns, Gonzalez, David Hogg, Cameron Kasky, and all of the fellow survivors and victims, living or dead, of the Marjory Stoneman Douglas High School mass shooting, they were and are just as human as you and I. Each with their own individual tapestry of friends and family and interests and idiosyncrasies and hates and loves that make up the ordinary and extraordinary parts of the fabric of every single person's life on this shared little rock we inhabit as it hurtles through space at 1,000,000 miles an hour. Nobody wants to be in the unfathomably terrible position that the Parkland shooting survivors have been thrust into. Nobody would want to see their friends, or simply any other human being, stranger or not, being brutally shot and killed before their very eyes. Nobody would want to suddenly be under the spotlight of the brief but viciously intense news cycle because of a shock of violence that tore through their lives. Nobody would want to have the far-right hate-mongers publicly declaring their tragedy to be nothing but a lie, a fabrication of governmental conspiracy. Nobody would want any of that ungodly weight crushing down on their shoulders. And if there was any fairness to the way things go in this life, nobody should have to endure any of that. Not a single adult, let alone a single teenager. But this multitude of teenage high schoolers have collectively had their lives irrevocably shaken to their very foundations, and have been forced by circumstances beyond their control to witness the whirlwind of chaotic barbarity brought about by the seemingly endless political debate about gun control that, in the nearly 20 years since the Columbine massacre, has never amounted to much more than the metaphorical snake continuing to eat its own tail. But as we've seen, the Parkland survivors were not willing to lay down and let the gun companies, the NRA, and the corrupt politicians in the pockets of both perpetuate their typical poisonous cycle of empty condolences, false promises, and casual dismissals of any arguments about gun control reform.
Our thoughts and prayers are certainly with all of those individuals. There's a time and place for a political debate, but now is the time to unite as a country.
The whole gun control thing, this is not the time and the place to be having that conversation.
I don't want to do this gun control discussion right now. There's a day, place, and a time for all that.
Let's wait and have that conversation later.
I'm more than happy to talk about this in a few days. Right now is not the time.
This is not the time to have the discussion.
This is not the time for this. It's just not the time to dive into the politics and try to score political points on this topic.
They chose to cast aside their former lives of normality and anonymity and take on the unenviable responsibility of letting the world construct a new narrative around them, to demonize or lionize them as frauds or icons, depending on who's telling the story, in order for them to stand up to the powers that be and challenge the toxic status quo in a real, meaningful way. And the early results so far: the March for Our Lives, and Emma Gonzalez's show-stopping speech. So, why that 4 minutes and 23 seconds of silence? It's not as if she just decided to include a random impromptu performance of John Cage's 4:33, even though with an extra 10 seconds it might have technically counted as such. You can tell in those first couple of minutes, before it becomes clear that her silence is an intentional performative part of her speech, that the audience goes through a variety of reactions of uncertainty. They wait with bated breath. They cheer her on in that kind of way an audience shows support for a speaker who's too emotional to speak. The online commenters continue to be largely maliciously malignant. Another cheering chant is started, again with the expectation that it will inevitably lead to widespread applause and consequently the resumption of the speech. Expectation is the key word here. We are hardwired with the knowledge of the rhythms of speeches. We're geared to expect the repetitions of key phrases that will make the speech stick in the mind. We expect a slow but inexorable increase of intensity in the speaker's delivery, both to punctuate the beginning and end of each subsequent section of the speech, and to build up to the final lines that are meant to leave the audience cheering and clapping. This is so ingrained within the public consciousness that even when the speaker is spouting complete nonsensical gibberish, it doesn't really matter too much, so long as they're following the right rhythms. So when Gonzalez subverts the expectations people may have had beforehand, that she was perhaps going to deliver a new "we call BS" style plea, and she then suddenly leaves us as the audience dangling in the unexpected, uncomfortable silence, what does that silence give us that words themselves could not? It's more than a mere moment of silence, which is usually all the time that is allotted to mass public displays of reflection, mourning, and respect for those who have died. It's moment after moment after moment, stretching out before us, encompassing as many as possible of the lives that have again and again and again and again and again been silenced by the pulling of a trigger. It's an ultimate example of showing, not telling, as she stares ahead defiantly, her face and her eyes quietly displaying every sentiment she wants you to understand that she feels, the fury of the movement she represents, the grief that still lingers under the surface, and the steadfast refusal to give up or back down. It disallows those who might try to turn her words against her from having the ability or luxury of doing so, while also making her message of sorrow and anger and indignation have no need of translation, because silence is a language that is universal. It allows for this exact kind of elaborate thought and debate to occur within ourselves, as her silence forces us to face inward and introspectively examine our own thoughts and feelings about the whole subject. And it's a way to shake off the cobwebs of apathy and lethargy that can creep into the minds of those expecting to fall back on the typical rhythms of protest speeches, where we might clap along to the beats we know we're meant to clap after, without truly listening to and absorbing the words and the message presented to us. Instead, by deconstructing the methods we so often implement in creating and observing inspirational speeches, where words may only deafen us to the overall point being made, Gonzalez makes it so that we can truly see the big picture, the forest through the trees, by letting silence do the talking.